Hello everyone. In this lecture series of global tourism, we are now in part 2 of Gateway 1. Today we shall look into the factors affecting tourism. Understanding these factors is important in order to explain the trends in tourism. The trends that I'm referring to are the trends that allow the increase in tourism or the fall in the numbers of tourism numbers. There are many factors that affect tourism. There are four of them, mainly the roles that are played by the government, the media, international organizations, and lastly, travel writers. Governments are responsible in influencing the number of visitors and their length of stay. This is done through the issuing of visas. Tourist visas in particular are controlled by the governments. The visa is basically a document that states that you have the right to visit that particular country. For example, if you are in Singapore and you would like to visit India, you need to apply for a Indian tourist visa. So, when you apply for a tourist visa, you need to submit documents such as your photograph, your contact details, your birth details, as well as your passport. Once you have submitted them, you need to have your visa printed in your passport so that when the immigration authorities in India obtains your passport, they will then look for your visa, and once they see it and approve it, they will then allow you to come to India and visit the various parts of India as a tourist. However, if you take a look at very, very open countries such as Singapore, which is open to tourists coming into Singapore all over the world, the visa restrictions might not be as strict compared to that of India. However, if you take a look at a particular case like South Korea is also like Singapore. They very much love to have tourists come and visit South Korea, but perhaps because of the not so cozy relations with North Korea, South Korean government may not be allowing visitors from North Korea uh, anytime soon, may not be allowing them to enter into South Korea anytime soon, perhaps because of the security situation. So, if you take a look at different countries and their governments, they have different policies to tourists that come from certain countries. Now, the governments also have the power to authorize air landings. This means that in order for airplanes to land in a certain country, they need to obtain permission from the government of that country. Certain planes or from certain airlines are not allowed to land in certain countries, maybe perhaps of the unfavorable political situation, or maybe perhaps of the terrible safety record of that particular airplane. Now, governments are also important because they authorize or allow the building of facilities such as hotels, mainly because where governments own the land in that country and they have a say to allow what sort of buildings are allowed to be built in certain areas of the country. Now, this brings us to the second point. Governments are also involved in planning, funding, the building of infrastructure projects such as airports, roads, and ports. Now, when you take a look at airports and ports, airports allow tourists to come and visit that country through air. While ports, on the other hand, particularly seaports, they allow tourists to visit that country through cruise ships or maybe small scale boats. An example of an airport is Changi Airport. Okay, do not forget to list these examples in your essay. So when you get Changi Airport, you'll get the many different terminals: Terminal 1, Terminal 2, Terminal 3, and there are even talks of upgrading the airport to include Terminal 4 in order to accommodate a rising number of tourists into that country. When we take a look at ports, if you take a look in for Singapore's example, we have the Tanah Merah Ferry Terminal and also the Harbourfront Port in Singapore, which receives tourists coming in from Indonesia and also inversely, for Singaporean tourists to visit Indonesia. So ports are very important in facilitating tourism. Roads, when they are built in the country, it helps to facilitate tourist activities, particularly if you want these tourists to travel efficiently, all right, through the different tourist sites of the country. Governments are also important in ensuring the safety and the security of tourist sites. They may deploy police or army personnel to guard different tourist sites. Now, if you take a look at, for example, the Mumbai attacks that took place in 2008, what happens is that you had a group of terrorists who went into the Oberoi Trident Hotel and the Mumbai Hotel. Now, please do research, take time to research this on the internet. Okay, so basically, what happens is that the terrorists basically had some religious or political disagreements with the Indian government, and what happened is that they stormed into the Taj Mahal Hotel over here, all right, and they took people hostage, and there were even bombings that took place in that particular area. Now, once the crisis has been resolved, all right, once the crisis was over, ever since then, the Indian government has deployed soldiers and policemen to basically guard these tourist sites in order to ensure the safety of tourists. Now, basically, if you cannot guarantee the safety of tourists, you would not get tourists visiting your country, and it's quite difficult for you to carry out your tourism activities if you cannot guarantee their safety. Now, lastly, the governments also undertake measures such as setting up agencies to promote tourism. So you will get in Singapore, you will get the Singapore Tourism Board, which basically oversees the tourism activities in the country. So basically, what the Singapore Tourism Board does is that they help to promote tourism in Singapore in other countries. For example, if you want to promote the night safari or the Singapore Flyer or Marina Bay Sands, the Singapore Tourism Board would then go about in to promote tourism in Singapore to different countries such as Australia, France, or China, and when do advertise these places, they may advertise them in the local language. So if they want to promote the Marina Bay Sands or Kampung Glam to attract the tourists from China, their advertisements in China will be conducted in Chinese in order for the Chinese tourists to understand, hey, these are fabulous attractions here in Singapore, and in a way, hopefully, they might want to come to Singapore and visit these places. So this is a video link to the Singapore Tourism Board promotional video called Shiok. So I would like to invite you to go to the YouTube video and watch the video. All right. So the links is provided in the lecture slides that I've provided for you. All right, so we have now come to the second factor, all right, that influence tourism, and that is the media. The media is basically a very powerful form of influence in the decisions of tourists, whether or not they want to visit the tourism sites. So the media will promote tourist sites through television, through the internet, or maybe through travel books. Now, in the second point, we see that when they do promote it through television, they normally do it through the promotion of tourist sites through the news and information through television and other forms of traditional media like radio, newspapers, and newer forms such as the internet. Sorry, I've repeated this point before. On the third point, we have the media being able to either portray tourists or countries in a positive light or negative light. Okay, so when you talk about positive reports, when they want to promote a country, they will talk about, oh, this country has a lot of beaches. For example, in Bali or Australia, they have beautiful beaches. They have beautiful natural attractions such as the Great Barrier Reef, or maybe in Singapore you have your Marina Bay Sands, or maybe in China you have your Great Wall of China, and the media might want to promote other areas such as the great food, the friendly people, or maybe perhaps the convenience of traveling around the country because of their efficient public transport system. Now, the media can also negatively portray different countries in the way that discourages people from visiting the country. For example, if there is a war taking place in places like Iraq, if you have a war taking place in places like um, in Ukraine, for example, if you have all of these reports being churned out into the news, it will definitely negatively impact, all right, the number of tourists that want to come into the country, because basically, why would tourists go to the country if they get themselves killed, right? Okay, so in a way, the media has this really powerful influence in influencing tourism numbers visiting into the country. Now, lastly, due to the media, tourists are now more aware of destinations that have not been previously considered. Now, you might want to investigate and do research on this place called Lombok. Lombok is an island in Indonesia that is just next to Bali. Now, I'm sure that you have heard of Bali, which is quite a famous tourist resort, and because it is heavily marketed in the media, Bali is, of course, very well known and is doing very, very well as a tourism site. But right now, we are hearing newer places like Lombok, its neighboring island, which has not been previously covered in the media. And Lombok, if you take a look at the country, it is just as beautiful, it is just as tourist worthy to visit when you compare it with Bali. Okay, so they are trying to market the Indonesian government is trying to promote Lombok as a tourist resort that is worthy of visit. Okay, now, when we come to our third factor, international organizations, they are very much important in influencing tourist numbers on an international level. Now, when we see different countries working together, all right, to attract tourists to their respective countries, you will get a sense of common purpose, all right, in order to promote tourism. So, when we look at international organizations, they are basically a group of different countries that work together for a common purpose, which is to attract tourism. In the second point, we see that these international organizations are responsible for producing reports, all right, that encourage or discourage tourism for visiting a place. Now, various examples would be the OECD, all right, the OECD Tourism Committee, the UNWTO, which basically stands for the United Nations World Trade Organizations, and also the World Health Organization. All right. Now, for the OECD Tourism Committee and UNWTO, they help to promote tourism as a way of spurring economic growth and environmental sustainability. For example, the UNWTO might want to churn out a report on a country called Costa Rica, for example. So, in that report, they will promote Costa Rica as a country that is absolutely pristine, it is beautiful, it is not tainted by pollution, for example, because the Costa Rican government, they have committed their government revenues, their government resources into protecting the precious forests in that particular country. And if you take a look at their military expenditures, all right, well, you will find that they have no standing army. Okay, they do not spend so much money on building up their military defense, but they instead channel it to their economic activities, and one of these economic activities is tourism. And and when they want to promote tourism, they are trying to they do promote ecotourism, whereby they encourage visitors to visit the different forests, their different beaches in that particular country, which the government has committed resources to protecting these areas in order to attract tourists. All right. So this aspect of their report, number one, the Costa Rican governments um, to promote tourism through environment sustainability and channeling all their resources to protect, all right, the environment from pollution or maybe deforestation in order to maintain their environmental uh, cleanliness, their environmental integrity of their precious tourist sites. Okay, so basically, these pieces of information are written in the reports, and this report is then submitted to the UN. WTO, to the different countries, so that different countries all over the world are aware of the government policies and the tourism policies that are available in that country. They then disseminate this information to their various tourist agencies as a way of promoting Costa Rica, for example, or countries and any other countries that you might want to research on to visit their countries. All right. And lastly, if you take a look at the World Health Organization, the World Health Organization basically provides updates and health advisories on epidemics which can discourage at risk countries. Now, if you take a look at you might be wondering, why does a health organization have anything to do with tourism? Now, if you take a look at cases like the SARS epidemic, or maybe the Ebola epidemic that has taken place quite recently, you will find that countries that are affected by these diseases, such as if you take a look at the SARS epidemic, which took place in Asia, for example, and the SARS virus, it has affected countries like China. It has affected places like Thailand, Indonesia, and even Singapore. When you have all these diseases taking place in those countries, it will dramatically reduce the number of tourists traveling in those countries, mainly because they do not want to get sick, they do not want to catch the virus, and because of the health threat, the tourism industries in these countries suffer. All right, so the World Health Organization basically decides whether it is safe or not, all right, to travel to these countries. All right, so this slide basically shows the link, all right, to a disease outbreak news on the World Health Organization website. All right, the link to this website is available in the notes that I've provided for you. Now, lastly, travel writers are the fourth factor, all right, that we can think of, all right, that are very much influential in influencing tourism trends. Now, travel writers, you see their work appearing in travel guidebooks, travelogues, magazines, and even on the internet, you will see travel blogs or maybe travel videos on YouTube. Now, basically, these travel writers write reviews about these places. So, in these reviews, they will go about visiting the various tourist sites all over the world. They will then provide an evaluation on things like accommodation, as in hotels, whether these hotels are good, whether it is cheap and convenient or whether it is expensive. They will also evaluate on the transportation and the quality of food in these countries. All right. So based on their evaluation, when it is conveyed to people who are watching or reading these travelogues or internet blogs, they will then decide whether or not they want to visit these countries. Now, travel writers also offer advice on the best and cheapest places to visit. Perhaps because if you are, particularly if you are traveling on a budget, all right, and they might also want to give you advice on the do's and don'ts on tourist behavior. So, for example, if you're a tourist in Thailand, for example, you might want to avoid criticizing the Thai king because it is considered a crime All right, it is considered a crime to criticize the Kim. So even though you're a tourist or a Thai citizen, if you criticize the Thai king, you will get arrested. Now, you might hear some tourists coming to Singapore thinking that they cannot spit, eat chewing gum, or litter, or smoke, or talking very loudly on in once they reach Singapore. And when they do ask you, please do not get surprised because they get all these pieces of advice from travel writers or maybe things that they read up on the internet. So you can see people are very much influenced by the amount of information that they receive from people who are very influential in travel matters. All right. And travel writers, the wonderful thing about them is that they do inspire readers to travel to destinations that readers might not have thought of before. Now, previously, I did talk about Lombok. Okay. I did talk about Costa Rica. You know, it might be a country that most Asians might not even consider going to. They might also want to promote tourist destinations like Nigeria, or maybe perhaps Mindanao in the Philippines. All right, they have very beautiful beaches there, but they have not previously been covered in all right travel guidebooks. So these travel writers, when they are feeling really really adventurous, they visit these unknown places. When they find that, hey, you know, these places are really really worth going to, they will then write about it. Okay. And one of the many travelers' reviews that have been published is guidebooks such as The Lonely Planet, The National Geographic, and you know, you might want to read up Expedia, for example. Expedia on YouTube, they have many different YouTube videos that help to promote these tourist sites. All right, we have now come to the end of Gateway 1. Yay! Alright, so basically, I really hope that you enjoyed this lecture series. Please feel free to review this lecture again, alright, in your free time. Alright, and that's all for me now. Thank you and have a nice day.